This is Western Mass News on Fox 6.
Nearly 2 years after a Massachusetts cannabis worker died, federal and local health agencies are now releasing new guidance to protect workers inside facilities. Welcome to Western Mass News at 10. I'm Abby Carnevale. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson now joins us live in studio. Maria, what are health agencies recommending in light of this report?
Well, Abby, some of those measures include making sure that employees are correctly wearing personal protective equipment and also the possible health hazards that come along with working there. I spoke with people who work in the industry and they tell me that these are welcomed but not surprising changes.
The CDC issuing a report Thursday telling the story of a 27-year-old Massachusetts woman who died after experiencing worsening respiratory symptoms while working at a cannabis processing facility. They say it's the industry's first occupational asthma death. That report says this case illustrates missed opportunities for prevention, including control of workplace exposures, medical surveillance, and treatment according to the current asthma guidelines. It explains the employee began to work at the facility in May 2021 and would go on to develop respiratory symptoms 3 to 4 months later. While the worker in the study wasn't identified, we here at Western Mass News have been closely covering the death of Lorna McCurry, a Holyoke cannabis worker who died of a fatal asthma attack in January 2022. According to the CDC's report, inhaling the dust found in cannabis production facilities can cause occupational asthma that can be severe enough to be fatal. Now the agency is calling for more strategies to protect workers, including the current use of personal protective equipment and making sure employees are aware of the risk for occupational allergies. Now those in the cannabis industry are reacting. Julia Argon, who works with the Human Connection, which is an organization that works with cannabis companies, says that these emerging guidelines are expected.
We're a fairly young industry, and particularly both manufacturing and agriculture are heavily regulated sectors. So, to have increasing understanding of how to keep employees safe and how to best regulate this industry. Nothing about that is particularly surprising.
And those in the education sector are looking forward. Holyoke Community College's Vice President of Business and Community Service telling us this case will become a learning moment for students.
It is a tragic loss of life, and so hopefully we can learn from that and focus training and education around ways that will help people be safe.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Commission also weighing in on today's discussion. They issued a statement earlier today that they welcome the Department of Health's recommendation and they're making sure that their constituents are aware of the CDC's finding. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.